Hi, Lauren. How are you? Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight? I see everyone is muted.
Hi.
Okay, there you go. That's better. I just want to make sure I can hear you all.
Hi, last time you said that the computer was making a sound like an airplane. Is it doing it again today?
No, I don't hear anything tonight.
Okay, great.
So whoever that was is not either not here or one of you have stopped landing airplanes in your backyard. Okay. Tonight we are going to be talking primarily about task 3, which is the assessment task. And but before we do that, I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have before we begin.
Yeah, I have a question because they all of a sudden they switched my placement to elementary ed, which is fine. And I was just now looking at the tasks and stuff. Do we do math as well?
Yes.
I know we do literacy, but we do attach on for math, right?
You do task 4 for math.
Okay.
And then the rest of it, the other 3 tasks are in literacy.
Okay.
What do you mean they switched you?
Well, because I'm in elementary education. That's my degree, but I've tagged on my GACE, which is in the state of Georgia, to be certified to teach middle school science. So then I would be certified K through 8.
Okay.
My original placement was in middle school, and then the district changed me to elementary.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a whole different ballgame for me.
Lauren, I hate to say it, but your path, your journey, just got a few extra steps.
Okay.
Yes, you'll need to focus on literacy in tasks 1 through 3, and then task 4 is a math add-on task that you'll have to do.
Okay, and then when you put the task on for the math, do we submit lesson plans too? I'm still going through it, so I haven't found everything yet.
You know what? Your instructor will let you know. I don't know that I don't teach any of the elementary ed teaching courses, so I'm not sure if they structured a little bit differently, but if not, you could still submit them on the PLN and to other people for EdTPA from your class.
Okay.
Just so that you have other people to take a look at them.
Okay, that works. Yeah, I mean, I've written a math lesson plan before. I just didn't know that we had to submit that for EdTPA.
Oh, yes, you will.
Okay.
So you're really going to end up doing 2 sets. The math is sort of a mini lesson.
Okay, that's what I was looking at. That's what I think. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions?
I had a question. When I did my video and I went back and listened to the video, I don't know if it was the program or something, but it sounds like there's just like white noise in the background on top of us. Are we allowed to edit the sound in our videos?
Okay. What you're going to need to do is if you use those videos that have the white noise, you are going to have to add a few pages of transcript. If they can't hear what you're saying or what the student is saying, add it as transcript, but you can't read paper really.
Okay.
The transcript, by the way, does not count towards your pages, towards your page limit. Lori.
The question I had is in the groups under teacher candidates, there's a place to download documents. The ones for the permission for the IEP and for the video, it would not find the file. Is there somewhere else to find those?
That is a good question. It was not on the PLN?
It's on the PLN. The group is the teacher candidates and then the student teaching orientation. So to the right.
You know what? Try under EdTPA.
Okay, thank you.
And see if we have it there, because I think we do.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think I found mine under EdTPA.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Yes, Dr. Sid. Amber?
Hi, Amber.
Hi. I wasn't able to make your last 2 live videos, but I did just watch the recorded ones. So I have 1, maybe 2 follow-up questions to the one about recording.
Yes.
So well, actually, this is more an EdTPA one. Do I need to have my EdTPA information and video and all of that coordinate with my 1 through 6 certification? Or does that not matter? For special ed, sorry.
Oh.
So I'm asking because I'm doing my student teaching. I'm slated to do my student teaching in my classroom now, and my kids are like middle school age, high school. But I'm going to be getting my special ed cert in 1 through 6. So I'm just wondering if I can do my EdTPA work with my students and still get a 1 through 6 certification. Does that make sense?
My feeling would be that if you were to do like 6, you might be able to do it. But that's really a question you should talk to your advisor about.
Okay.
Because I'm not a good person to make those kind of judgments.
Okay. And my last question was, at the end of the discussion for the recording, everyone was talking about how to do different videos or what would be the best quality. Would you happen to know if I could just use my Chromebook, set that up, put the recording, video record right on that, and then, does that sound like that would be?
You know what? It seems to me that would be fine.
Okay.
Again, I'm not a techie.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm not an expert at any of this.
Okay.
So again, you may want to get really friendly with a techie at school.
Okay.
The guys who do the smart boards and, they come and fix that stuff.
Okay.
That'd be your best bet.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have anybody else?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Sid. It's me, it's Keisha Reese. I just logged in and I heard someone say something about a script. When you do the video, there's a script that goes with the video. I mean,
No.
when we do our video. Oh, okay.
If you have a piece of the video that cannot be heard, either the student is talking really low. Especially with special ed, this could happen, right?
Yes.
You have a student who just kind of talks down through like this, Then you may add several pages of transcript of what the student said that you could not be heard.
Oh.
But it has to be exact transcript. It does not, however, count towards your commentary pages.
Okay.
But no, you don't have to have a script. Please don't have a script.
Right.
That would be bad.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay. Any other? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Kayla. I got 2 questions. I was reading part 1, task 1, and it was mentioning how the student's goal that we're focusing on needs to kind of match what we're doing in the curriculum or vice versa.
Yes.
I was wondering because I'm slated to teach in my own classroom, which is science, and the student doesn't have, in special ed, they don't have science goals. And so I was wondering if I tailor it to more toward the writing goal that they might have, would that suffice?
Yes.
As the science
Yeah.
part?
In fact, what you might want to do is have them write about science,
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay.
but that'd be fine.
And then one other question too. We're starting a new unit next week. And so I was thinking, would it be okay if I go ahead and start on this EdTPA stuff next week and then submit it in a couple of months?
I know that you want to get it done. I feel it.
Mhm.
Okay? From all of you. I have 11 psyches now bombarding my spiritual energy with, please let us get this done quick. The problem is that, number one, you're going to coordinate it through your class, through your online class.
Mhm.
Number two, you must finish the planning section before you can move to instruction.
Mhm.
So you need to make sure to take your time with it, make sure everything is the way you want it to be, and then move forward with it. So it may not necessarily be this unit, it may be the next one.
Okay.
But go slowly, take a deep breath and relax. And, I'm going to do a new presentation. What do you think? It's going to be called The Zen of EdTPA. Deep breathing exercises, a little yoga here and there. I don't know. But in any case, you could certainly start doing the planning for it. Remember, you only have one focus student that you have to deal with. So when you do the taping, if you're only using one focus student, you could actually start and stop wherever you want.
Okay.
But take it easy. Go make sure you've got all of your bases covered. And do not turn it in before you finish student teaching. That would not be a good idea.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
It'll be all right, I promise. Okay, I can't necessarily promise that, but. Okay, other questions? All right. One of the areas where we get the most questions deals with the assessment task, task 3. And so we're going to focus on that today. And when you get the copy of this, I understand there's some parts of this you may not quite be ready for yet, but we'll talk it through, and then I'll send this out to you. You've all been getting the YouTube links, right?
Where do we find those at?
I've been sending them out on the PLN. Have you not gotten them?
I
I've
don't
been
think
getting
so.
mine in the email.
Oh, you've been on YouTube? Oh, goodness. They're under Dr. Sid.
Okay, I'll look.
Dr. Sid EdTPA. I have a few videos there. I am not particularly organized about how I put these on. I put them on YouTube because I think it's better to preserve them that way. So you can go ahead and find it through that. Okay. Today,
This is Fabrice.
I'm sorry?
Fabrice. Just want to tell you I joined in.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Keisha. Okay. Today we're going to be talking about several things. Understanding assessment, the cycle of teaching and learning, informal formative assessments, formal assessment, analysis, and activity. Understanding assessment. What do you know about assessment? In the text box, please share what you know about assessment. Don't worry about that. You don't need to fill anything in, okay? The task 3 is all about how we assess teaching and learning. So you can see primarily it's going to be about learning on our happy little Venn diagram. Okay. Why do we assess in the classroom? It provides diagnostic feedback. What is the student's knowledge base? What is the student's performance base? What are the student's needs? What has to be taught? So one of the things that we've already discussed is that
you fixing to get license for her?
Is that
they did give her.
One of the things we've already discussed is assessing prior learning. It's a good idea to do that before you have all of your plans necessarily set in stone, because it will tell you exactly what it is that your students know and what they need to learn. Also, it provides you with data. And we understand that one of the key principles behind EdTPA is to provide data of student learning, of what the student has learned. How it helps educators set standards. What performance demonstrates understanding? What performance demonstrates knowledge? What performance demonstrates mastery? And although those are all things that we oftentimes use interchangeably, they mean different things, okay? To understand something doesn't necessarily mean that you can do it. It means you know how it works. Knowledge allows you to know more than just how it works. Mastery allows you to do it, right? So when we're talking about mastery, we're not just saying that a student can look at a math test and say, oh, I see you marked this wrong, okay? I know why you marked this wrong. That would be understanding, knowledge. I can see in the next 4 that 2 of them are wrong because now I have mastery. So mastery means not only being able to correct mistakes, but being able to find your own mistakes and being able then to correct them. So when we talk about assessment and we talk about what we're going to send in to EdTPA, the highest level of assessment really is to show student mastery of our material, not just student knowledge or understanding, but can the student now do this themselves without your help or prompting?
I have a question.
Yes.
Because I'm special ed. So for students, a lot of my students will never show mastery, like they show growth. Will we be like dinged for that?
You know, it's really hard to say. The more that your student can show that they know what they're doing, the better it is. For example, even something simple. Can you tell the difference between a penny and a nickel? okay? If you get to a point where a student by themselves can move a penny to a penny pile and a nickel to a nickel pile, that's showing mastery.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily how complicated the task is. It is how well has the student demonstrated that they have learned what this is, what the task is, and how to do it. Why do we assess in the classroom? Evaluates progress. How is the student doing? What teaching methods or approaches are most effective? What changes or modifications to a lesson are needed to help the student? Relates to a student's progress. What has the student learned? Can the student talk about the new knowledge? In our case with special ed, can the student communicate somehow about the new knowledge? Can the student demonstrate and use the new skills in other projects? So again, this is what we mean when we're talking about mastery. Now, one thing that's very important, not just because of EdTPA, but in general, is this point number 3. What changes or modifications to a lesson are needed to help the student? I have to tell you, I have a course. It's not, I have other things besides the student teaching course. I had one student who wrote to me and said that the reason why his student wasn't succeeding was because they were lazy. What is an educator's response to that?
That you're not motivating them.
Exactly. And I will say this to you because you're going to use it forever. It is our job to engage the student. It's our job to motivate the student. If we have students that are not motivated, then there is something that is wrong. If you have a whole class of students who are not motivated, then the problem is probably not with them. It is probably in the way that we are teaching. And so that's why we put so much emphasis in this program on differentiation. Those are the kinds of modifications that we're talking about here. If you have every student in a class fail a test, the problem is not the student and not the test. Clearly, something didn't go well in you transmitting the information to the student, and so you need to try other things. I know you all know this. I'm just reminding you because it comes up quite a bit in student teaching. And I'll tell you one more thing, and this is just personal from Dr. Sid to you. If you go to a teacher's lounge and all they do is complain about how awful the students are, stop going. Stop going. I used to have lunch with students. I had a resource room. And so I would have students come up and I'd have lunch with them because, frankly, I got tired of walking into the teacher's lounge and hearing about how awful this one was and how terrible that one was. This one is just lazy, and this one gets it from his parents. And, you get to a point finally where you need to just not deal with all of that and work with each kid as you find them. So when I was a student teacher, I was under contract already, but I had lunch with the kids. They were much more fun to talk to anyway. Because I taught middle school, so you just never knew whether they were going to be little kids that day or they were going to be super mature. So I love middle school. Just saying. Okay. The cycle of teaching and learning. Now, notice that EdTPA, our 3 tasks, are really going to very much parallel our GCU cycle that you see in front of you here. And this is available on the GCU website too. Okay? Task 1 is planning. Task 2 is teaching. And task 3, which is what we're talking about tonight, is reflecting. What are we going to do to show that our student has learned? How do we reflect on our students' learning? And what does this give us in terms of information for the next step? What are we going to do after we finish this particular set of lesson plans, this particular learning goal? And all of that is what you're going to need to look at in task 3. Even things like, what could I have done better so that my student would have learned more? So a lot of times people who are doing EdTPA are very much afraid of making a mistake. What if something in my lesson plan doesn't work? You know what? If something in your lesson plan doesn't work, join every teacher who has ever lived. One rotten lesson plan. Look at what happened to Socrates. No, nobody's going to make you drink poison. But what you will see is that there's nothing wrong with having a lesson plan or an activity that doesn't work, but you need to figure out why it didn't work. What is going on? What were the problems? How will we improve that activity or change it altogether for the next time? And so that is part of our reflection on teaching. What went right and what went wrong? And how do we make positive changes? Sometimes you'll only have a class period to make those changes, right? You have a morning class that just bombs. You're doing the same lesson plan again later in the day. And so now you're rethinking that lesson plan. What am I going to do? How am I going to change it? I've got to make sure it doesn't get the same reaction. Okay, informal formative assessments. Formative assessments can be included within the lesson and at the end of each lesson, 2 or more per learning segment and the pre-assessment, and 1 or more assessment of student voice. This is the, there is no specific standard, but it would be good for you to show in EdTPA at least 2 formative assessments in each lesson. And they're not really hard to do. Sometimes, as I said before, it's just making a note in a notebook next to you about what happened in class that day. Exit tickets, entrance tickets. I mean, there are all sorts of creative assessments, but you do want to make sure that you have your pre-assessment and 1 or more assessment of student voice.
Okay, I have a question about that. So we can do I was looking through the paperwork because we can submit an extra video if necessary, because I know a lot of schools, at least around where I'm located, they're really big into depth of knowledge questions, and those could be used as formative assessments.
Absolutely.
As well. So that I could submit something like that, and then I could also do an exit ticket for the day, and those would be like the 2 assessments.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. You may want to space it out over a couple days. Well,
Yeah,
no, you could do that as one day. Yeah, you want 2 a day. So you could definitely do that as 2 a day. And, don't be afraid of using the same, using an exit ticket every day of the plan. Because, the scorer is not sitting there and saying, ooh, look at that. A creative formative assessment. I don't ever want to see them do an exit ticket more than once the whole week. That would be silly. So if you have something that works, use it, and feel free to use some of them again. A little variety is good, but that doesn't have to be a major focus.
All right, thank you.
The formative assessments must align to the lesson objectives that are based on the grade level standards. Below is a link to 60 ideas for formative assessment that you can utilize in lessons across all content areas. You will have this, if you just go to Google and Google formative assessments, you will get a ton of lists from all sorts of different groups on formative assessments. Choose ones that work for you. If there are some that you have never used before, you may not want your first time using it to be for your EdTPA. You may want to practice it ahead of time. It's like, do any of you ever watch cooking competitions? Like Top Chef or
Yes.
Hell's Kitchen? It's okay, I do too. So, the guy the chef who comes in, he's got to cook a big meal, and so what does he do? He cooks something he's never done before. Does that always work out well?
No.
No, usually not. And the same is true in teaching. If you're doing new things is great. Doing new things the same time you're recording your EdTPA may not necessarily be the best idea. So make sure you go with things that you're familiar with and that your students are familiar with.
Dr. Sid, I have a question. This is Amber. The formative assessments must align to the lesson objectives that are based on the grade level standards. None of my special ed students are even close to grade level.
Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Whatever their standard is. Special ed, by definition, means they're, I guess, 3 years behind.
Yeah.
Right.
And so nobody expects them to be working on grade level.
Okay.
So
great.
don't worry about that. That's
okay.
why your lesson objectives are coming from your IEP.
Okay.
And that's why they're doing that.
Right.
So, don't freak out about that.
Okay.
Dr. Sid, I have a question.
Yes.
This is Keisha here. I'm kind of piggybacking on what we were talking about earlier about our students. Now, what if you are in a situation where you are already in your contracted teacher, you may be in a self-autism, self-contained classroom, and you have children that are nonverbal. I mean, I know there are a variety of ways to assess them, but you did say something about the student talking or using their voice or whatever. And then, I think Tiffany said, sometimes you have to, prompt these students. Like, how do we go about working, doing that with students and assessing these students? I mean, I know there are various assessments that we can do, but if they have very low to no language, then.
Yeah, first of all, there are a couple of answers to your question. First, when I say more of assessment of student voice, I mean something the student can do, not necessarily something they can say.
So it can be something tangible, like hands-on and stuff.
Exactly. The other piece of this is EdTPA requires students to be able to communicate in some way. So it can be sign language, it can be adaptive technology, it can be, any way that a student can communicate is fine. It does not have to be verbal communication. However, I would suggest for EdTPA trying to find a focus student who is verbal.
Okay.
Or somewhat verbal. I think it will make your life a little bit easier.
Yes.
But EdTPA does not require that a student be able to speak. It does require that a student be able to communicate in some way.
Okay.
I have a question also.
Yes.
I'm slated to work in a school that the majority of the scores are the lower 40th percentile. When it comes to reaching the grade standards, I don't know what I'm going to be dealing with. How is that going to affect it?
It's not.
Okay.
Now, Lori, you're going to be doing
general
ed.
Yes.
You're not doing special ed.
No, I jumped onto this because I couldn't somehow connect with the other class.
Okay. What you're going to want to think about is, first of all, you need more than one focus student. And in your planning, you're going to talk about where these kids are in terms of their levels. And they'll know, the scorers will know that that's what you're doing.
Okay. I was very nervous about that.
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous about the things you can't control.
Okay. Thank you.
You just have to be able to explain.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
And by the way, an explanation, I'm sure we all know, means that we're going to provide data in the context for learning document from standardized testing or whatever, showing where these students are, not our opinion, right?
Exactly. Okay.
Provide evidence.
Very good. Thank you.
Dr. Sid, this is Tiffany. I have a question. In regards to the focus student, like I've been keeping a daily journal like you suggested, and it's more of like a summative of how the class did. Is there a certain amount of students that I should focus on? Or like even when I submit my assessment and work samples for the student, like should I send a class set or?
For special education, only one focus student.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why I say that. On the one hand, I want you to show what you have learned. On the other hand, I don't want you to be doing this for the next 12 years.
Okay.
So if the EdTPA says one focus student, 2 learning goals, that's what I would give them. One focus student, 2 learning goals. Do you see what I mean? Don't gild the lily. Don't pad this thing. I got the same advice when I was doing my dissertation, because every doctoral student wants to write this great dissertation that's going to change the world. And my dissertation mentor, the first thing she said to me was, just do what you got to do and get your degree. And in other words, don't expect to write a masterpiece that's going to change the world in the year that you want to take to finish this degree. Afterwards, if you want to be a researcher, go ahead and do that. But, let's get where we need to go first.
Okay. And with this one focus student, that's whose work samples and assessments that I would submit to that.
That is exactly right.
Okay, awesome.
Okay. Formative assessment for motivation. For student self-evaluation, now that I'm in charge of my learning, how am I doing? Now that I know how I'm doing, how can I do better? What else would I like to learn? That may be difficult for some of your students. If your students can be metacognitive on that level, that's fine. If not, don't worry about it. For teacher self-evaluation, what is working for the students? What can I do to help the students more? In what direction should we go next? This is really at the heart of task 3. These 3 questions. Okay. Informal assessment examples. And I'll leave them up for just a second so that you can take a look at them. I am not going to read all of it. But it just gives you some ideas about what you might use. Okay. Educators use language assessment to analyze student learning through reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Students use language to express their learning in a variety of ways: language function, vocabulary, etc. Remember, this is not necessarily by verbal communication. It can also be done by different kinds of communication. Formal assessment. Formal assessment in the learning segment. Formal assessments are summative. They can be graded or ungraded. 1 per learning segment. Possible format is a handout for post-assessment. So you've got to have 1 for each of the learning segments. Now that's not the lessons, that's for your whole unit of instruction. So you don't have to have a summative assessment every day, but you will need to have a summative assessment for your unit. Possibly, remember we said this before, the easiest one to do would be a post-assessment. It could even be the same as the pre-assessment. Assessment criteria tool used to differentiate strong performance on an assessment would be a rubric, checklist, answer keys, exemplars, etc. Formal assessment, we just said, can be used as pre- and post-assessment. There must be alignment between lesson plans and assessment questions. Alignment is the degree to which planning, instruction, and assessment overlap. If you are working with your student on science, don't give them an assessment on vocabulary. Do you see what I mean? Be very careful. Make sure that your learning goal that you planned is directly assessed by your assessment. That was a terrible sentence. Don't any of you ever use it. Assessment criteria must include directions, sections for quantitative, qualitative, and student voice evaluation expectations. The formal assessment may be used as the work sample for task 3. In fact, it should be used as the work sample for task 3.
I had a question.
Yes.
My students did their assessment, but they're in 1st grade, so their spelling is not the best. But I know that they passed the assessment. Do we need to write what they really meant, what the words are, or just leave it the way that it is?
Leave it the way it is.
Okay.
Unless you're correcting it for them to fix, you know. But if you're just correcting it for the scorer, don't do that.
Okay.
The formal assessment in the learning segment must include directions, quantitative questions, which can be incorrect or correct. So what people call multiple choice questions, right? I call them multiple guess. So multiple choice questions, math problems, things like that. Qualitative questions, which are open-ended. So you're looking at short answers, essays, finish the phrase, or things like that. Student voice includes students assessing their performance on the learning target or central focus. How comfortable is the student with their performance? How comfortable are they with their knowledge? And can they express that through the assessment? Labeling assessments. So this is just how you would label them for EdTPA. Lesson 1 would be assessment 1.1, assessment 1.2, etc. So you kind of all see how that works. Analysis. Work your way through all assessment components. So we have student work samples, formal assessment, assessment of student voice, multiple informal assessments, and assess prior learning. So this is our pyramid of what we're looking for all of the components of assessment in task 5. I'm sorry, there is no task 5. In task 3. It's been one of those days. Analyze for alignment. Assessments must be analyzed for student progress towards the learning objective or learning segment. Remember, it's all about what the student has learned, not how you have taught. Have the students met the goals and objectives of the lesson? Is this demonstrated in student outcomes assessments? Analyze for trends in learning. Assessments demonstrate what students know and are able to do for the whole class, groups, individuals as applicable. Okay, so you may not be able to do this for special ed because you've only got the one student, but in elementary or in middle school, some of the other areas where some of you may be teaching, you want to look for those trends. You know, all the students seem to get question number 3 about the function of the heart incorrect. What does that trend tell you as you're analyzing your teaching? It tells you that you probably need to reteach something. Okay? So you want to look for those trends if you can. What level of thinking do students demonstrate? Bloom's taxonomy or Webb's depth of knowledge? Depth of knowledge is a big deal these days. And so, you know, and again, this may be very rudimentary for some of your SPED students. Are there common errors or gaps in knowledge that demonstrate scaffolding remediation needs? We just talked about that. Task 3, assessment rubric 11, analysis of student learning. So this is actually a rubric of, and it's in the back of your handbook, so it's no big secret, about how your task 3 is going to be scored. So it involves your analysis of student work to identify patterns of learning, And let's look in the glossary to learn more about patterns. Patterns of learning includes both quantitative and qualitative patterns for different groups or individuals. Quantitative patterns includes a numerical way the information is understood. Qualitative patterns include descriptions of understandings, misunderstandings, partial understandings, and or developmental approximations. Most of what you are going to be doing if you have a single focus student is going to be qualitative, or it will be quantitative, but with the student, comparing the student kind of before and after, as you would do with a pre-assessment. Okay. And here you have an analysis of whole class learning, which you probably in special ed won't be doing. And here's an analysis of pre and post test. So this is definitely something that you may want to consider. By the way, it never hurts to put in a chart. Charts are good, especially for displaying data. Analysis. So in some of these handbooks, like elementary, you're going to need 5 focus students or 4 focus students or whatever. And so here is where you would analyze, this chart is where they would analyze how they did. And again, this is always good to have a chart like this. Okay, planning from assessments. Reflect on instruction prior to planning next steps in instruction. What evidence do you have to justify ways your plans made content meaningful? What went well in your instruction to meet the objective? What could have been a better strategy to support the objective? Use assessment info to plan next steps for instruction related to the objective. What instruction can you provide next to remediate, reteach, extend, or progress student learning related to the objective? So what parts of your student learning do you feel need to be retaught? What would you go back and work on again? How will the next steps vary for the whole class, groups with similar needs, and or individual students? Providing student feedback. What is the student doing well? What does the student have an opportunity to improve? How can you help the student use data to reflect on their learning? How can you help the student understand how they can use the feedback for relearning and future learning of related content? What resources can you provide to the student for help? Teacher, handout, textbook, etc. Prompt students to respond, such as by making corrections to the assessment. So feedback needs to be a much more active part of the assessment process than perhaps some of us are used to. We need to have the student in some way let us know that they not only understand what we're saying, but have mastery of it, as we said at the beginning.
Can you give us an example?
Right. Well, I did. Is that Keisha? Or
No, this is Fabrius.
Oh, Fabrius. Hi, Fabrius.
Hi.
Yeah, I gave one before. If you're working with special ed students and you're teaching them the difference between a penny and a nickel.
Oh, okay. I heard that.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the kind of thing. We're not necessarily looking for big things when we talk about special ed. We're looking for things within their capability that they're going to be able to learn and show that they have learned it.
Okay, okay.
Okay, assessment rubric 13 involves your support to focus students as they understand and use feedback to improve learning. Focus students should receive feedback to develop in areas identified for growth, continue to deepen areas of strength. Explain how you will help students understand their performance and thinking on the assessment, including justification for correct answers. And use the feedback for application related to the learning objectives, including revising work or creating new demonstration of learning. For example, if a student struggled sorting items into categories, you may show them how to use a graphic organizer to first chart the items, and then to use the organizer as a reference in the writing process. Okay, you've already seen Ms. Bannon. We're gonna get by this to the end. All right, and it's just about time for questions, so I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you might have tonight. Any other questions?
I think I got the formative assessments. You know, I'm trying to make sure I get that right about the formative assessments and the informative assessment.
Okay, formative or summative is a graded assessment that you would, mostly graded assessment, that you would do at the end of the unit.
Okay, okay.
Formative is what you do during the unit. And it can be anything. It can be exit tickets, observations. You saw that Tracy, who put this PowerPoint together, gave you a link to 16 formative assessments. You can find them all over the internet. So that's informative assessments, excuse me. So that's the difference.
Okay, okay, got it. I understand it now.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you all for being here.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, it's Rebecca. And you probably went over it, but I want to know, like, how are you putting math and literacy in the videos? Like, say we're teaching history. How are we including math and literacy in our...
Are you doing special ed?
I am.
Okay, then you don't have to worry about math or literacy.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
That's only for elementary.
Okay.
Every handbook has its own particular focus. In elementary, you have to do a math task, and your first 3 tasks have to be somehow involved with literacy. For special education, you may use any of the academic subjects.
Okay, thank
So
you.
you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Another quick question. If you were doing a formative, let's say thumbs up, thumbs down, would you want to videotape that, or can you just write it out and record it?
you might want to do both. You know, it depends on what else you're using that segment for.
Okay.
But you can certainly describe it, you know. He gave
the results.
Is fine.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, yes.
It's Kayla. I know that we're saying that we're going to have like one focused student, but say in a lesson plan, like a student has an accommodation of small group. And so in the recording, we do small group with our focused student. We use the data from that. Is that fine?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it need to be one-on-one?
No, it can be you can use a small group.
Okay.
But remember, if you do, you need to get permission from all their parents.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, I will see you again on Wednesday for our almost next to last session. And keep up the good work. And you asked very good questions. And I will send this out to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Have a good night, everyone.
Well, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.